Let's have a chat about PPN 0621, the new carbon reduction standard from the UK government. This video takes you through what is it, what do you have to do, who needs to do it, and when you need to do it by. So if that interests you, tune in, and for the next sort of 15 minutes or so, we'll go through the basics. Hi, my name's Darryl, I'm the carbon lead at Anistic, and what I'll be doing for the next sort of 10-15 minutes is taking you over the basics of this PPN 0621, which has given its full title, Procurement Policy Note, taking account of carbon reduction plans in the procurement of major government contracts. Okay, shortened to PPN 0621. Not a great title, but you know, above my pay grade to change it. Okay. In this video, we'll be looking at what is it, who needs to comply with it, what do you need to do, when do you need to do it by, and at the end of the video, I've got a couple of tips for you. So a couple of sort of quick tips to make it easier for you to comply with this. Okay. So let's kick off. Number one, what is it? It's a Procurement Policy Note, it says so in the title, and that means that this is issued by the Cabinet Office to other areas of the government, saying that if you want to do major contracts, you need to consider this, okay? Now, they've put it in as a requirement, but with exceptions. So not all contracts will require you to have PPN 0621 compliance, but they also say they will be very surprised, and they better have a really good reason why this particular contract that's coming up for renewal, or this framework agreement coming up for renewal, doesn't need PPN 0621 compliance. So if I were you, I'd consider every contract that you're going to be doing with the government that meets the criteria of this. I would assume that you have to have this in place, okay? It's a pass-fail sort of standard, okay? If you comply with all of the terms in this, and there's a technical guidance document that goes with it, but it's also not very long, sort of 6 or 7 pages, you pass. If you don't comply with any provisions of this, you fail. There's no gradient, there's no sort of scoring saying these guys have got a better sort of plan than these guys, it's just yes or no. And if it's a no, you can expect to either be scored severely heavily against any renewal contract, or indeed blocked from being awarded the contract, okay? Now, it came in the 30th of September 2021, okay? That's when it became sort of live and become a live requirement. And it applies to all government contracts where the annual value of the contract is in excess of £5 million. So if you've got a government contract that you're tendering for with over £5 million of value annually, you have to have this PPN 0621. If you are in the NHS, then this applies to you. So if you're an NHS healthcare provider, this applies to you. But furthermore, by April 24, all suppliers to the NHS will require this, okay? If you've got a contract already in existence or a framework already in existence, then the guidance says you do not need to comply with PPN 0621. Okay, it's just new contracts. So that's who it applies to, and what, you know, sort of the requirements about who needs to bid for this, who needs to have this compliance and who doesn't. What is it really? It's a carbon reduction plan template. Okay, so it sets out a fixed format of a report called a Carbon Reduction Plan, CRP, where in the CRP you've got various sections that detail your carbon use, and you have to sort of report both what the carbon emissions are in various categories, what you do about it, what your targets are, etc. And I'll go through that in a second, okay? So the CRP, the Carbon Reduction Plan, is an annual requirement. It must be published on your website. It must follow a set format. You can't ignore any sections of the requirement. So for example, you have to report on upstream deliveries. If you say, look, they're tiny, you still have to report them even though they're tiny, okay? It's annual, so you have to sort of do it every year, and it has to be signed off, okay? So there's a space on the back of these things where you have to sign off, and it's normally done by a senior board director. That's our recommendation on that one. Okay, you have to put in place in this plan your plans to get to net zero by 2050, and you have to put in place, you have to describe the procedures and the mechanisms you're going to apply to the contract you're bidding for, and more generally to reach that goal. Okay, so there's quite a lot that goes in there. Let's go into the components of a carbon reduction plan in a little bit more detail, and I'll go a little bit more slowly for you. So I think I hurried through some of the ones earlier. So there are 14 major components of the plan. Okay, it's a set format, it doesn't really change, and that means that they can take carbon reduction plan from supplier A during contract bidding, and B and C and D, and they can then pull these out into a spreadsheet with everybody using the same kind of fields and the same kind of descriptions and methodology. You have to describe your fuel. So let's take 3 things in fuel. You have to explain and detail your electricity use. Okay, that's your total electricity use. You have to describe your gas use and any other fuels you have, such as LPG or diesel. So if you've got a diesel heater, an oil burner, that sort of thing, you need to include that. If you've got propane or you use LPG for your forklifts, again, that one needs to be included. Next section are all the travel components. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. So let's have a look at it. First off, it's all of the fuel you put in your company vehicles. Petrol, diesel mainly, so all of that. Second is all the carbon emissions from your staff mileage. So that if staff attend meetings, go from A to B, you pay the 45p a mile. You have to sort of write that down and quantify the carbon emissions from those. Then you've got your other sort of business travel, bus, train, plane, tube, whatever. Okay, one of my clients has got a private plane, so that's going to knock it sort of straight out of the park. But all the business travel elements need to go in there. And again, you need to take the business travel, quantify that into carbon terms. Then you've got commuting, okay, and you need to quantify how much carbon is emitted in staff commuting to and from your place of work. Now, we generally include work from home in that. We think it's an important component, but that's optional, and if that's going to cause you a problem, you don't have to include that. That's kind of an optional extra. With the commuting, we normally do it, we've got a platform that kind of handles it all, and there's a survey built into the platform, and you can just issue the survey out to staff and say, go there, fill this in, tell us about your sort of the commuting habits, and it will work everything out from you from that survey. Then you've got 2 tricky ones and a third kind of tricky one, but it's not as bad as the first 2. The first 2 are your upstream and downstream deliveries. Your upstream delivery is the carbon associated with deliveries that you take in, i.e. your suppliers, and the carbon emitted when they deliver stuff to you or your various offices. Okay, for that you're kind of going to need how far things come, you know, whether it's a generally truck or van, isn't it? Let's face it. So the truck or the van, how far it comes, how full it was, whether it's petrol, diesel, etc., etc. Again, that's all built into, you know, a software platform. We use the Nistic platform, and it just kind of put in all the numbers, and out comes the sort of result. But you do need to know roughly how many deliveries you're accepting into the company. Next is the reverse of that, is downstream deliveries. So that's the deliveries you make out to your clients. So again, you should be tracking that. That's normally easier because you've got better records of that, in my experience. So it's how many times you send out stuff by UPS, by truck, by van, you know, however it's going to be. Okay, so upstream and downstream. They generally, there's some complexity there, and my advice is get someone who's done it before and ask them, you know, how you go about doing it. The next category is waste. Now that again is difficult to process, but broadly we're speaking about how much waste you generate, be it kilograms or tons, what type of waste it is, where it's going. Is it going to recycling? Is it going to landfill? Okay, so that's waste. That, honestly, that can take days to process. So that's a nightmare. Again, it's built into the platform, but you still need to put the data in the correct fashion. The other components you need to put in, the last kind of 4 sections that you need is you need to declare a base year. So you need to say that we're going to reduce our emissions by X over period Y compared to a base year. Now, it's all nice and easy. Everybody chooses the current year or the previous year, but be careful of COVID. If COVID has hit your business hard, and let's say your operations have been reduced by COVID, then if you go out to the world and say we're going to reduce them by, say, 10% over a sort of 2-year period, then if you're starting from a really low base because of COVID, you're going to struggle. So I would not choose a COVID year. I would choose either the year before COVID, for example, 2018, 2019, depending on when your financial year is set, you know, when it starts, when it ends, or choose sort of 21, 22 or 22, 23 as your base year. Okay, the higher you can get that base year, the easier it will be for you to show reductions. Okay, so don't choose a low base year. Second is you must declare a target. You must have a target of becoming net zero by 2050. That's a requirement of the standard. But you must also, you know, sort of set an interim target, and most of my clients will choose something like a 40% or a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. That's very typical. Some people then go further and introduce targets for 2040. That's your call. But you know, you need one target. Then you need a description of everything you're going to do to run the contracts with the government in an environmentally friendly manner. Okay, so doing your best to reduce carbon down. Now, with a lot of people, they just put in things like, we're going to use video conferencing where we can and swap all our lights to LEDs. I don't think you're talking about that here. I think you have to be explicit, saying we're going to be doing this, which is going to reduce the carbon by that. And they've got to be like project specific items. Okay, you don't need many. You know, I think one of my clients has done 3 or 4 pages worth of textual description. That's probably a bit long. You know, you could probably get away with a page to a page and a half, maybe 4 or 5 projects, that sort of thing. But what you want to show is you want to show that we've thought about it and here's what we're doing about the environment, you know, during the course of fulfilling this contract. Okay? Then lastly, the last kind of component you need in there is you need your progress sort of charted. So you've got a chart saying this is our plan down here, this is where we are this year, and as it's annual, you can imagine that every year you can plot your progress down and you can look at a reduction down. If you wanted to, you can include a couple of other bits. These, what I'm about to describe, are non-essential. You might say, well, forget those, there's enough work doing the essential stuff. But if you want to go above and beyond, some of the things that you can sensibly think about would be looking at the carbon emissions of your supply chain and actually putting in supplier policies, supplier handbooks, supplier guidelines, etc. to reduce the carbon in your supply chain. We see that quite a lot. I'd say about 30% of my clients, you know, choose to include supply chain as an appendix to the standard document. Yeah, so it's not included in the main document, it's an appendix which allows the government to compare A to B to C to D, but in the appendix you describe the extra measures you're going to go to in that. You might also look at how, describing again in an appendix, what offsetting measures you're taking. So you want to say, look, we really do care, here's the basic stuff you need, and at the back saying, look, we're going beyond that. You don't get any extra points for it, but when you start talking about supply chain, so talking about your carbon footprint, if you don't include supply chain, you're only looking at half the story. Okay, so it's for your own peace of mind. You can also expect some elements of supply chain to start becoming legal requirements for example, ESOS or SECR. Okay, I don't know that for sure. That's the rumor. We don't know until it actually happens. But you're kind of all working in the right direction if you include supply chain measures and offsetting. Now, that's quite a lot, isn't it? I brought one to show you. So this is an actual, throw this over here. This is an actual carbon reduction plan that one of my clients has done with us. This is 15 pages long. I won't be able to show you the inside of it, but it's got a selection of charts, tables, plans, projects, descriptions, etc. Everything that I've just described, all in here. This was generated from our software platform. So our software platform, you type all the data in, and it will throw out the basic framework, and then the basic framework, which is normally with us, we export it in Microsoft Word format. Then we bring it into Microsoft Word, edit it as we need to, and that produces your final document here. Okay, so that's the kind of thing we're talking about. That is a carbon reduction plan. There you go. Now, I promised some tricks and tips. Okay, so I've got 3 for you. Okay, first off, biggest thing is if you've been asked to do this for your company, if someone has said, do you mind taking this on? Step 1 is get some help, okay? You can ask for help from your colleagues, okay? So for example, we need to type in all the electricity data. I wonder if you, speaking to maybe someone in facilities, would mind doing that. And we need to type in our flight data, speak to someone maybe in your travel department or however you do it. Some people do it central, etc. Do you mind inputting that data? Financial information, sometimes you can get people in finance to help you, but get help, okay? That's internal help. External help, there's quite a lot in this, you know, and it's a pass-fail. You don't get shades of grey. You don't say, well, look, you got most of it right. This is a pass-fail. If you get some of these components wrong, you will not pass the PPN 0621 requirement, okay? So the other thing is get someone else in. I mean, we do it, we do a lot of them. The platform makes it easy, but you know, whatever you're going to do, get someone in to look over your shoulder to make sure you cover the bases. Okay, that's quite important. So number 1, top of the list, get help, internal, external. Number 2, you know, if you want to do this on in Excel, good luck. I hope it goes really well. It is possible. You know, you can do it in Excel. However, there's a lot of data to process. It does accumulate year on year. If you've got multiple sites, you know, you're talking about a huge amount. So imagine you've got, say, 12 sites. Each site has electricity, gas, waste. It has upstream, downstream, ... So you're talking about, you know, a truckload of data per site, and then you've got 12 of those. So you soon start drowning in data. So you need to look at a software platform. You know, I'm biased. We've got our own. It's designed for this, the Anistic platform. But whatever you're going to do, you know, make sure you got the right tools for the job. Last tip, and then I'm kind of done, is make sure you leave enough time for this. The fastest I've ever seen it done is about 7 weeks. Okay, and it's not because the report's complex. It's just you need to get the data right. And if you've got a lot of data to collect and to enter into some sort of software platform, then you know that takes time. And the biggest problem you're going to get is you're going to reach for example, the electricity use from your base year, say 2018, for example, and someone will say, well, I haven't got it. And you have to go and request it, and you know, then no doubt they send the wrong thing. All the day-to-day problems that you'll find, that's what will slow you down, okay? Detailing down your, for example, carbon reduction plans, you need to collate those, you need to find out what they are, who's doing what, etc., etc., and all that takes time, so leave time for it. If you can do it in 7 weeks, good luck to you. A more realistic time frame, I think, for a PPN for us is probably around 12 to 15 weeks elapsed. Okay, we can go faster if we've got the data, but you know, that's kind of a sort of good rule of thumb. So there you go. Get help, use the right tools, otherwise you'll struggle on that one, and leave enough time to do it properly. So there you go. Well done, UK government, for coming up with this in the first place. It's a good step forwards. It marries up with other pieces of legislation, ESOS, SECR, TCFD, ESG, lots and lots of acronyms, but it forms a good solid chunk in the middle. It's also quite fair, saying, look, we're not forcing you to do it, but if you want to work with us, hey, you have to do it. Okay, so it's quite a good sort of carroty, sticky kind of balance going on there. And in my experience, you know, this brings carbon onto the agenda of boardrooms, which is exactly what we need if we're going to try and reduce the carbon footprint of the UK and therefore, you know, of the planet. Okay, so there you go. PPN 0621, rubbish title, very good piece of of drafting there. They've covered all the basic ones. It's a good choice. I would probably put supply chain in, as I said as well, but it's a good choice of scope 3. carbon factors, and it means that, you know, as a country you can work towards net zero. I hope that was useful. If you've got any questions or if you need any help, etc., get in contact. We're happy to help. And if you've got any sort of tricks and tips, etc., put them at the bottom of the video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a bunch. Bye bye.